And the other stuff that's in there, don't worry about it. We'll deal with it as it comes up. I want you to know more about me before we start, because I want to be clear as I can about my particular biases. I work right now, as Ralph mentioned, for the Ohio Society for Autistic Citizens. That's not much of a society in Ohio, at least. I don't know about Minnesota. As I'm sure you know, autism is a low incidence disability. We don't have, we're lucky, we don't have very many people with autism, but that means we don't have very many people in terms when it comes to membership. So what the state society in Ohio does is, to get its money and to do things of benefit, is I spend all of my time involved in projects that are service or training projects. We don't offer any direct services like workshops or residential, but I'm currently involved in 2 projects that are funded through our DD Planning Council. Those projects have little if anything to do with autism. Some people that benefit have autism, but most of the people are mentally retarded or mentally ill. The focus of both projects is to provide technical assistance and training to community agencies throughout Ohio that are trying to support people with challenging behavior in community settings. So and I think it is true, Minnesota's like Ohio, most of the people that actually are active clients in our residential and day program situation are labeled either as mentally retarded or mentally ill. And that's who we spend. Most of the people would probably be labeled mentally retarded. We are involved in a number of other states that have indicated interest in what we're doing, and they're trying to establish a similar system of supports, and we work there too. The project, just so again you'd understand the extent to which we are involved or not involved, our project in Ohio, and again, I'm not going to describe the project to you. I'm going to try to share the ideas that we're working on. But again, so you understand what our project does. In Ohio, we have a county-driven system. There's a county board of mental retardation and developmental disabilities. They pretty much run the show. They do all residential planning. They operate most all of the daytime programs. And so the way a project gets into our the way a county gets into our project is they apply. They say, we're bringing back people with behavior problems from the institution. We have people in the community. We would like to become more confident at doing that. And they get involved in the project and nominate 4, 5, or 6 people, children and adults, that they label as having behavior problems. And they have come to the conclusion that either they rejected the person. Some of the people that they select are in the state institution where they had to send them because they couldn't support them in the community. Or more likely, the person might have is still living in the community but has been suspended from some program. There's an interesting phenomenon in most states. Somehow, day programs cannot serve a person, but residential programs can. And so we expel the person from the day program to the group home, which changes who gets bit and who gets hit, but doesn't do much toward helping the person. Every time I go to the residential conference, I start a petition going around that would allow residential providers to expel the person to the day program. You know, on a Sunday, you could call it the day program workshop director and say, open up, he's coming. Or even better, the clients could expel staff. But so we work in, and sometimes Ohio is also one of the only states in the United States that currently justifies home instruction because of the child's behavior. We have lots of children in Ohio that are at home or in their group home or foster home and getting 1 hour a day, maybe 3 days a week of home instruction because of their behavior. Anyway, the people that are picked, we then do a futures plan with them, and I'll describe that to you later. And we go through a series of workshops, training sessions in those home counties. After the end of about 6 months of that kind of work, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of the staff that have been involved in all that training or family members express an interest in going on into advanced training, we then go through about 6 more months of training with them, with the hope that after the first year of all of this, those, especially the people that went through advanced training, will be in a much better position to share what they've learned, because the purpose of the grant is to allow us to provide the kind of assistance to a county so that they can carry on after we leave. It varies a lot. We've worked in some counties, and I think you'd have to be an archaeologist 6 months after we're gone to find we've ever been there. Other places, people say there's been a real impact. We think differently, we act differently, we're serving people differently. You can see, and I'll go into this more later because I think it's fundamental to serving persons with behavior problems, but we have 2 different focuses to the project. One is training and staff competence, and we could all be better probably at whatever job we do. But there is a side to the project that also says the system's got to change. So one of the more interesting aspects of the job is to get to frequently meet with the trainees and say, what have you learned? What would you like to tell other people back where you were? What would you have them do once you tell them that? Because our programs have not really been developed with persons with challenging behavior in mind. So oddly enough, things don't work too well when we serve those persons. Now I'm going to focus some on that today, not because I expect you're in the greatest position to go back and change all the systems you work in, but it would simply be a lie, and it would be to perpetuate a lie, to say that the major solution to working with people with challenging behavior is better behavior managers. They may be part of it. Better teachers, that may be part of it. But if we can't focus some at this level, things aren't ever going to get better for the people. In most states that I've worked in, especially in, say, the daytime program or the group home, they're designed as if you would expect if you went out into the lobby where they have the plaques that have the names of the white men that were on the board when the thing got started, that there should be an 8.5 by 11 color picture of a guy named Jim. He has Down syndrome. He's 22 years old. He smiles all the time. He's very well dressed, has a tie on all the time. And Jim is the kind of person that you could walk up to at the workshop and say, Jim, would you please run around the workshop 4 times? You don't know who I am, and I don't know who you are, but it would really, I'd like it if you would do that. When you're finished, come tell me. And in about 5 minutes, out of breath, Jim would arrive and say, I did it, now what? Because Jim has been socialized into the role of a retarded person. He pleases other people. He's a nice guy. He's easy to deal with. He's a happy guy. And his picture should be out there, not because of all those positive things. His picture should be out in the lobby because the planners that built the building and developed the budget and designed the staff training thought about Jim when they did it. And they designed everything around Jim. And then when Merle shows up, the guy I'll show you in a minute on the tape, and he's putting his head through windows and knocking people down and spitting and turning over tables, people throw up their hands and say, why, there's something wrong with Merle. He's not fitting in here. It doesn't work. We got to fix Merle. When from the very beginning, nobody should have seriously believed that this program would do very good at supporting this guy, because it was designed for a totally different person with totally different needs. Staffing ratios in sheltered workshops of 1 to 15, 1 to 20. Group homes where you have maybe 1 staff person on duty and 8 people, or 2 people and 8 people. And those people are being paid at the level that require them to quit and go to Burger King to make more money. And they get, hours of training instead of days of training. And then we plug in people with extraordinary needs. Things come apart and we look at the person and say there's something wrong with them. I'll probably say this a lot, but it means a lot to me. Most of the people that I end up working with, that this project ends up working with, most of those people could be characterized as having lives that are much crazier than their behavior. Yet their behavior is what we focus on. and we say it's got to change, and nothing else much needs to change. There's something wrong with it. We don't believe that, so we work very hard throughout the project to keep saying, what have we learned about the capacity of your system to deal with this guy? How does it need to change to be better and more supportive? So that's what I do. We don't, like I said, we don't do direct service. I do some direct service. You can see some stretch marks on my arms. We do quite a bit of hands-on training, trying to help people be better teachers, because a small part, but it really is only a small part for most of the people we work with, a small part of the problem is that the people don't have good teachers. And in the workshop, what they're doing in terms of trying to keep the person at their table and doing work and stuff is not real confident work, and it could be improved though. Or in the group home, when the people are trying to get the guy up and off to work and dressed and teaching all this stuff, they're not doing such a great job of that teaching, and so we work and we help. They shouldn't be doing such a great job because most of them haven't been trained. But we don't, that's as close as we come to direct service, is the hands-on training that we provide. My bias is that my training, I used to call this talk Confessions of Profound Behaviors, because that's what I was. My friends in Michigan, where I used to teach, now call me a backslider, however, because I don't have the party line when it comes to behavior management anymore. I guess I'm a recovering behaviorist. Someday there'll be meetings, like AA meetings, where people get up and say, I'm a behaviorist, and everybody will laugh and say, that's okay, that's okay. How long has it been since you've been one? I haven't used an M&M in 4 years. I haven't, as a matter of fact. I really meant to eat. This is going to be complicated to try to summarize, but I think by the end of the day it may be a little more clear. I still fundamentally believe in behavioral teaching principles. I mean, I can't argue with the fact that if you pay a lot of attention to people when they act out, they tend to act out a lot more. People tend to do what pays off for them. Those principles are true. They're like gravity. There's a lot more, though, to serving persons with challenging behavior. There's a lot more to be concerned about, values, attitudes, none of which I had any training in or understood at all. So part of the day is also going to be that me sharing, at least with you, the changes I'm going through, and I know our project is going through. Because this little one-day thing is, I was just back in Michigan where I did most of my early work, and I was on the grounds of the state hospital where I used to work. And I was having the pleasure of trying to find a building that no longer existed because they've torn it down and now it's a little park. It's a little bit, must be like, though, going back to Germany, trying to find the concentration camps, and you think, people don't know what used to be here now. You can't do it. Because if you see these 3 or 4 benches sitting where a 4-story building that used to have 2,500 people in it, people used to die fairly regularly in it. It's almost frightening to think that it's gone. We should have probably left it there. It's scary. But when we used to do the training back then, we started talking about reinforcement and punishment and stimuli and responses, and we managed probably to get about 2/3 of the way through the first day before we mentioned we were talking about people and human beings. And so hopefully some of that has changed. And we also would have characterized those problems with the system as, well, it's just people that don't understand behavioral principles. It was an us versus them. It was a bad guys if they'd only let us do what we want to do. And I think now, anybody that's really involved in the life of a person knows you can't draw those kinds of lines. And one of the tougher things that I'm personally trying to learn to do is express a new way of thinking, more respectful, a little bit more worried about changing other people's lives, trying to understand why people do what they do before setting about the change. It's been real easy to come to think that way about people with disabilities, it's been real hard to share that with my peers. I find myself sitting around tables, and when people say negative things about clients, persons with disabilities, I find myself defending the person with a disability and saying this person can grow, and all the stuff that they tell us to say. And then, however, if the case manager, let's say, who was saying that, happened to say, but the superintendent of this program, he hadn't had a new idea in 10 years, he'll never let us do this. I find myself saying, right, son of a bitch, he's probably never do it. And obviously, we cannot show this respect and concern only for people with disabilities. But it's hard. I mean, what I usually go through in terms of new ideas is I reject them, right? I mean, someone says, you could do it this way, and I say, no. And part of it is, I wasn't trained to do that. And when people started talking about normalization to me, and they started talking about negotiating with people instead of setting up contingencies, I wasn't trained to do that, and also I was trained to do something else. I not only did not know how to ask and negotiate and to deal with people on a kind of a peer basis, but I also knew how to do something else real well. And that was say to the person, this is wrong in your behavior, and I'm going to change it, and here's how it's going to happen. And then I would take something away from them and wait for them to get better and give it back. Over a period of time, though, I go through this. I begin to know that what this person is saying is probably right. But I can't talk or make sense out of it to other people. I don't know if any of you have ever met John O'Brien, but he's one of the brightest, most knowledgeable, wise guys in this field. And he's always telling stories in the workshops, and I think they're great. And I go home and I tell my wife the story, and she looks at me with this blank look on her face and says, that's a nice story, but what does it mean? Or why is it relevant to this? And then I start fumbling. I know that he told me something that meant something, but I can't make sense out of it. And if I get more than 10 feet away from him, I can't make sense out of it. And then very, very slowly, I begin to accept it, and when I can begin to talk about it and do it, I know I've really acquired whatever it is the other people are doing. I'm sort of at this stage with a lot of the stuff, at least in my life, about changing people's behavior. You'll see some videotape this afternoon where a good friend of mine named Barb is in it. She's a client in the county system where we work. She's lived 14 places in the last 9 years. She has cerebral palsy, I guess. She sounds drunk. Says kind of a waver to her voice. She's in a wheelchair, and we don't know why. She had a spinal tap to test her about seizures when she was a young adult, and she never walked again. She was living in one of our state institutions, and she said she couldn't understand what the doctor said. And it's not in her records, oddly enough. Somebody used to walk. They don't walk anymore. It doesn't say anything about it in her records. But she has sure taught me a lot about what this means, person to person. And I'm at this stage now of where I'm not directly involved in her life anymore. I cut off being a professional with her. She was a target client in the project, and I got to know her because I was on her futures planning. I facilitated her first futures planning meeting. And I've become her good friend, though, and I can no longer be a kind of a professional with her because we're friends. And she's in a system that's pretty much outside of my control. She's living where she shouldn't be living. She lives with 12 other people. She should live in a place of her own. She hates to have to eat at picnic tables because they had to move picnic tables into the dining room because a fellow there smashes all the regular tables and he can't turn over a picnic table. Oddly enough, she's offended when a new staff person that she's never met walks in and says, "It's time for me to bake you." She gets angry about that. She gets angry that, that Anita gnashes her teeth hour after hour and that she has to listen to it. And so I'm now going through this terrible time of where I go to meetings now as her advocate and her friend. And they start talking about what they've got to do to Barb. She has a really bad behavior at times. She can be the most hateful person I've ever known. And I realize that I can't support that anymore. And they start talking about restraint, and I cannot think of a condition in which I would take her to the floor. And it makes you begin to think, well, why am I not so reluctant to take other people to the floor or to do whatever it is to other people. So I'm kind of stuck in here now trying to figure out what this means and how reasonable can we be with people who have very, very unreasonable behavior. And one of the people that I would like to thank in advance who's really helped me think through this is a fellow named Herb Lovett. And there is a book that's on that reading list called Cognitive Counseling and Persons with Special Needs. It's a very, very good book. I've learned as much from that book as any book I've ever read, especially when, and luckily enough, that's where most of us are, you don't have control over a person's life. You don't lock the doors. It's not an institution. You've got to live with this person. You've got behavior problems with the person. Some thinking about that. It's not a cookbook. It's not full of a bunch of solutions. But in terms of rethinking some situations, it's extremely good. I will also try to respect the fact that you guys are also in a very bizarre situation in your jobs. You're in a kind of a middle ground as far as I can tell. You get to go to meetings and you get to supposedly, I guess, chair some of them or run some of the meetings. Even if you're not doing that, you have some degree of leverage about what happens because you're supposed to be in a position to decide whether this is a reasonable thing to do, or you get a chance to decide whether other people thought this was a reasonable thing to do. Now, you guys doing it, but I don't think you're in a position to literally make, personally make it happen as much as, say, the direct service person might be. So I will try to focus a lot of of today on the kinds of ideas, the kinds of strategies to think about that you might use in that position. Ideas to influence how you think about that. When you look at something, does that make sense? Is it a good thing? And ways you might share that with other people. So, if when I want to just spend most of the morning talking about what I at least consider to be some basic ideas, some basic concepts that you build everything else on if you're going to work with people with challenging behavior. And keep in mind, while the specifics are very, very different, I don't think it matters a lot about the label to the person. Persons with mental illness, persons with mental retardation, persons with no particular psychiatric or medical label. We're talking mainly the same kind of ball game. An interesting phenomenon that I've noticed recently is, though, where people start talking about, but this person has mental illness, I don't think it'll apply to them. And the thing that's so funny about that to me is the history of behavior management came from the mental illness area. We didn't even get to work with mentally retarded people for a long time. We were sort of assigned to the back wards. The first place I ever worked was the state hospital. And we worked in the back wards of the state hospital. They wouldn't let us on the receiving unit because those people were actually mentally ill. And you had to be a psychiatrist to touch one of those people. But there was an odd thing that if in the first year to 2 years the person didn't get cured or better, then they just had a conduct disorder or behavior problem, because if they'd have been mentally ill, they would have gotten fixed because there were doctors there. And once we got back into the back wards, they would let us work with the people that were called the chronic patients, and they even labeled the area extended treatment. So I'm going to be talking about people with a variety of different kinds of labels, but so far, in my experience, I haven't seen where any of these fundamental principles would be any different no matter who you're talking to or about. The first thing that we deal with in terms of a strategy is to get people to think about what they want to do with the person. Most of the people come to our training wearing jeans and t-shirts the first day because they're sure we're going to be talking about restraint. And that, COPE, BART, MART, all those various acronym things, because they come with the overriding concern of, he bit me yesterday, what am I going to do about it? And they hope that there'll be a cure. They want the person to get fixed. One of my other friends is a fellow named Donald. Donald's not nearly as good a friend as Barb, but Donald has had 72 hospitalizations in the last 10 years. He's